Everybody, thanks for joining us this week. Have you ever thought about what is in your food? You might be surprised, even if you think you know. Everything from cancer causing agents to endocrine disruptors, heavy metals, toxic everything. And don't expect that the warning labels are going to tell you everything you need to know either. There are variances around the world. We're going to do a deep dive today and present you with all the information that these big corporate food companies don't want you to know. So, thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Quantum Ladder Podcast. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Quantum Ladder Podcast. My name's Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good friend and co-host, Mr. Marquise Williams.
What's up, Louis? What's up, everybody? This is going to be a very informative and information-dense show, and we're going to make it entertaining and fun for you guys, so don't even worry about that. But, man, we got a lot to talk about today. We got a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to move, rather quick because we don't want to dwell on the same slide for too long.
Right.
For anybody who wants to maybe write down the names of some of these chemicals or take notes, feel free to pause the video. We've made the slides big enough that you can still read them even if you pause it. And we're going to present some videos as well, as we normally do. And big thanks to everybody listening right now out there in the world of YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and the UNX Network. If you're listening to us on the radio or Apple Podcast and you want to see the imagery and the videos we're playing, just head on over to our YouTube channel and search for Quantum Ladder Podcast, and you can see the full presentation. And it's also on Spotify as well. We play full videos as well. And thanks for everybody for joining us in the chat room. We always seem to have an electric chat. Everybody's, polite, on fire, and have, on point things to say. And, it's a pleasure from this side of the screen to see everybody on the other side of the screen. And we love doing this. So with that, this is a big enough topic. We could do a series. We could do a podcast just on what's in our food. So we wanted to give as many little tidbits and oversights on the big ones. Yes, there are many rabbit holes within each of these things. Why are they there in the first place? How is there no oversight? How was this allowed to happen? And basically, we're going to paint the picture of outdated and systematic hiding of things. Basically, if the laws have not changed to say you need to do this, these companies are not. And, when questioned, a lot of the times the answer is because it's not in the law. We don't have to do that. So a big part of these issues is the consumers don't know. And when you're tossing around big chemical names, you need to be a chemist to understand what they are, or a science major. The average Joe doesn't know. And these companies have taken advantage of that, thinking that, just because we don't know what that chemical is and it's in our food, we just have this, trust that, I'm sure somebody, the FDA or somebody's watching out for us. You're going to be surprised. We're going to show you some things the FDA allows to go in your food. And just because it's in there and the FDA approved it, is it still something you should eat or want your families to consume, your kids and all the rest? I mean, let's be honest. We have a sick and overweight population. What if a lot of that is not these people's fault? What if you just don't know? What if it's stuff that's causing addiction? What if it's stuff that's changing chemistry in your body to make your body behave differently and you're none the wiser? Should we not know? And that's the crux of today's episode. So I have a little video. It's kind of one of those like gross you out a little bit videos of like what's actually in food. Now, this may not all be North America. We're going to see rice with plastic pellets in it and stuff like that. But again, it's not impossible that these things could make it to your table depending where you're shopping. And you really need to become a bit of an investigator nowadays. You can't just go to the same old grocery store you've always gone to, buy those same old brand that you've always bought. They've changed the ingredients. And a lot of times they're never good in the first place, right? Or instead of using old leavening agents. They've used new synthetic compounds, and we really don't have long-term studies on what these things do. They test them on animals, but we're not an animal per se. Certain diseases don't affect animals the way they affect people. Like your dog doesn't get the flu when you're at home with the flu. So, animal testing is not the end all be all of what is actually safe for consumption. So, here's a quick clip on some of the grosser things that are in our food currently. Man, that's a
Wow.
lot. That's a
Jeez,
lot. I
jeez.
didn't watch that full video. I just saw a couple things. I'm like, okay, this is relevant.
Yeah, some of these videos I'm watching for the first time too. Everybody listening, so that was a shock to me. To be honest, I was well aware of a lot of the food, the fake foods or the fake things they put in foods, or how they kind of artificially make them look nice, especially red apples, for example. There's like wax around them, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that's in bananas. It can be crazy how, and I didn't know some of those products. I did not know that rice had plastic. Some of the rice has plastic pellets in it. Um, Luckily, at least for a few of those items, I have an alternative already. But some of them, especially ice cream, my friend, I've got an addiction. So I'm gonna have to test that out with my ice
Yeah,
cream too.
squirt some lemon juice if there's baking soda or any type of like caustic soda that you would find in like, I don't know, washing machine powder,
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
bubble and
yeah.
fizz, right?
Oh
And
man,
like if there's rice milk in the water, the algae turns blue, the various impurities in honey, like stuff that people aren't
jeez, yeah,
suspecting. Like, come
yeah.
on, you've been buying honey from the same brand for 25 years. You had it or more. You had it when you were a kid, and now it's diluted with stuff. Like, I've heard of shrinkflation where, You used to get a, I don't know, a 200-gram chocolate bar. Now it's like a 130-gram chocolate bar for the
Yeah.
same price.
Yeah.
Basically, that's just portions. But to literally take out real ingredients and, supplement it with, in some cases, chemicals, and be allowed to do it. And one of the first things I looked at was loopholes. So this is from the Breast Cancer Prevention Partner. They basically found that it's called the GRAS provision within the
Right.
FDA. So it allows certain things that are we deem to be mundane, like salt or nutmeg or whatever. It can just pass through without you having to submit it to the FDA again to get your product. If you make something out of, all FDA approved stuff, it really speeds up that process. But the issue is, these chemical manufacturers are secretly using chemicals for packaging and their processing, and they're not getting FDA oversight, approval, or knowledge.
Right.
So there's basically a loophole in the law, and this is an abbreviation on. So the Toxic Free Food Act of 2021, which was sponsored by Rosa DeLario. So essentially, a major loophole in U.S. federal law governing food safety let chemical companies decide in secret what additives and chemical compounds were safe to use in our food, the processing, and the packaging. So as a result, the public has been exposed to harmful chemicals through food that the US FDA has not approved and may not even know is being used.
Mm.
When they did some research, thousands of synthetic chemicals are used in food beverages or making any of the materials or packaging, anything between the harvest and our mouths. Over 10,000 chemicals used in food processing and packaging alone. 5,000 of them are so-called contact materials. So just contamination, basically. Everything from improving the flavor, the appearance, increasing its longevity, shelf life, chemicals that are also lining cans, of tomatoes and pop. There's chemicals in that. Some of these chemicals are harmful to human health. And there is a scientific direct and indirect link to food additive chemicals in areas of breast cancer, impaired development of healthy brains in children, fertility, reproductive problems, metabolic illnesses, diabetes, cancer. I mean, you name it. This is worse than
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Yeah.
And, this has been allowed. And there's tons of articles about this right now. This is from Eat This, Not That on healthy eating. But there's literally thousands of unregulated chemicals in your food. So these companies know that. They can use that. It's cheaper, if there's no long-term studies on these things. And think about like a long-term study. Somebody has to fund it and continue funding it for 30 years. You think the food companies are doing that? No,
No.
not unless by law they have to, right? And then they're
Yep.
using their own scientists and they get the data before the world does, right? Like,
Well, let me so I have some figures here that I wanted to share with everybody. And like, because I was like, how do they get away with this, right? So one of the key ways that companies do or can bypass these FDA regulations, that obviously put these harmful chemicals into our foods and our drinks or our beverages, is through that GRAS. By the way, I didn't know what GRAS was when I first saw that. It's generally recognized as safe. It's
yes.
it's kind of ironic.
Yeah. It's
It's
like we
kind of like a
think you're
parody.
good.
It's it's a parody. It's like, we kind of think this is safe. We
Yeah.
Most of us kind of think, but it's just a regulatory pathway where these substances or additives, they're added to the food and they're not required to undergo these pre-market reviews and approvals by the FDA. And they're just accepted. They just let them go. And there are people that are considered qualified experts that essentially give them the seal of approval, and they say they're shown to be safe under the conditions of their intended use. So,
Yes.
which is great. Which again, it's just kind of a caveat. The word intended use is something that should be kind of noted here. It should be noted. There's like in 2012, I have a figure here also. So there's let me just read this one figure for you guys. Companies can self-declare their additives as GRAS. That's generally they're seen as safe, recognized as safe, without notifying the FDA. A Pew Charitable Trust analysis found that between 1997 and 2012, about 1,000 additives were added to food under this GRAS exemption without being reported to the FDA. So you talk about loopholes. They're often under what's called independent review, and the safety assessments for these GRAS substances are conducted by or on behalf of the companies using them. They're experts, their own experts.
That's right. That's right.
it's a clear conflict of interest. There's like no getting around that. Like, this isn't right. So
It's
um,
like saying that you're gonna make your company, everybody's gonna have to take an exam, but it's an open book exam that everybody gets 100% on. It's not, it doesn't really serve the purpose it's supposed to, right? Like on paper, you're doing what you're supposed to do,
yeah,
but
yeah,
who's really watching how this is executing? And I mean, it's your mind starts to spin when you look at the number of things, the number of mundane things that we didn't really think were that big a deal. What science is now saying that they could be involved in some of these problems, especially when it comes to kids and development. And,
yeah,
you know, if we're
yeah.
giving kids things we think are safe and they're having them every single day, they have a lifetime of toxicity before they've even hit puberty. And especially some of these things are affecting your hormone system, right? Your nodes and all that. It's going to affect, there's been rumors that KFC gives hormones to their chickens. That's why young girls and boys are developing
Mhm.
breasts at like 9 years old. It's because of
Yeah.
hormones in the food. And there aren't as many regulations depending where you live in the world, what part of that country you live in. And, in some cases, just your access to it. In certain countries, the food producers are allowed to do whatever the hell they want, and people are starving. So there's nobody that's, checking what's in their chicken. They're just happy to have it. And this is a systematic. I mean, we talked about epigenetics in previous episodes. Yeah, genetically, you may have precursors for cancer, but there's a lot more in the way of markers and things you can switch on just in your life. And
Mhm.
definitely things like toxic chemicals and all the rest of the stuff that we're going to talk about. They are epigenetic causes that cause disease. Even if you have the best genetics out of the gate, you could still wind up dying of lung cancer as a non-smoker because of some environmental thing. It's
Yeah, the thing is, and this is kind of a talking point that people who when I was younger, I avoided, and I still do, by the way, avoided cigarette smoking. I don't judge anybody who does it, by the way, but I just personally didn't like doing it. People used to ask me, "Oh, well, you can still get cancer if you don't smoke cigarettes." And my retort was, "Have you ever taken a look at the stuff they put in our food?" This is like a decade ago. I used to think about this stuff. It's been going on for forever, especially they have more and more regulations, but corporations and politicians are constantly pushing for deregulating things like these companies for the sake of growth in business. The whole ideology is that regulations stunt the growth of corporate profits, which ultimately they believe hurts the country. And when you mentioned the USA, in the US, we have the stupidest arguments for deregulation that you could ever think of, but it's effective. The messaging is very effective because the idea that they're selling people is catchy. It's the idea of not letting us grow and become more prosperous when people are suffering. They instead of blaming the companies that are not only increasing the multiplying your suffering, they're blaming people who want to try to pull back on some of those deregulations that people are pushing for, those politicians are pushing for. But we live in weird times, and we kind of always have in a way.
Yeah, and you mentioned the corporates, the corporate world of, if we told you, you might not buy our product. And we're gonna do a segment on baby food and formula and things like that. And this is in relation to the greed of those baby food companies not making changes, even though they were warned and discovered that they have, unsafe things in them. There was still a reluctance to do it. And he's either a lobbyist or a lawyer, but he's gone head to head with these companies and he's talking a little bit about his experiences. So check this out.
Certain ingredients are contaminated with heavy metal. And the problem with the baby food companies is they knew it and they didn't care because they were making so much money and they didn't want anyone to know. When I ask them, you have an ingredient list and you say, this is how much iron is in there. This is how much vitamin C is in there. Why don't you tell us how much lead, arsenic, and mercury is? And their response to me in deposition was, well, we're afraid you would go buy other people's products. The baby food companies are afraid that the bad consequence is that you won't buy their product. That is unabated greed and it needs to be stopped.
And you know, I'm glad we're doing this topic because it's not just about presenting some of this information. It's also like looking into the mindset of these corporate, uh, these corporations. How do they think? We did a episode on this a couple weeks ago. How corporations are and how there's corruption in the corporations. But to think that their concern is more so about profit again, about preventing loss of profit, and not about preserving human life and health and well-being. Can somebody like? I just hope that this influences some of you out there who might be thinking, unlimited growth is good, and deregulation is good. I really hope this kind of gets you to see they don't care if you die from some of these problems. They don't care if your kids are ill from it, or influence, or their development is stunted. They don't care about that. They only care about how much money they're making from you.
That's right. And the law is not really forcing them to care. There's no due diligence other than it can't be over a certain limit. The fact that there's any arsenic in our food, it's not like it's being added intentionally. It's just pesticide residues,
Yeah,
heavy
byproduct.
metals,
Yeah.
leads, it's old piping, it's old trucks transporting raw ingredients.
Hmm.
It's,
Hmm.
not the cleanest conditions, right? So, like, everything is coming in contact. Even just if the wheat is stored in an area and that's where the trucks come in and out, there's black
Right.
diesel soot that's inevitably introduced. The air quality of that factory is not actually that good on the outside, and if that can reach the ingredients, again, we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to get into things like PFAS, or forever chemicals. They call them
Hmm.
forever chemicals because they don't get out of your body. And even in the water supply, we know that there's plastics, not only from a pollution standpoint, but then they break down these little tiny pellets that get into the food supply and fish and everything else. Well, then they call them microplastics. Man, they're like so tiny, you almost need a microscope to see them. Well, they're also breaking down into nanoplastics, a 10,000th of the width of your hair. And nobody is filtering this stuff because of the cost involved with it. There is no such thing as a way to get this out. In fact, I think I have, here it is right here. This is an article on getting forever chemicals out of drinking water. And this is a water plant near the Riverside Station pump, the Kennebec River. Not sure where the Kennebec River is. It's in the US somewhere. But they're basically saying that these particles are so small, no matter what filtration systems you take on yourself, or cities use, or bottled water companies use, nobody's filtering at the nano level.
Hmm.
At minimum, they're filtering chlorine and fluoride and things like that. They do other things, UV treatments to kill bacteria and all the rest, but nobody is using a nano filter to get plastic out. And in fact,
Yeah.
we ran an article on Facebook the other day. I don't know if I actually clipped that or not, but essentially it was talking about bottled water having as much as a small bottle of water, upwards of here it is here, 250,000 um, particles on average. They tested
Mm.
some that were like 110,000, and some plastic bottles of water had 400,000 pieces per liter of nanoplastic. And they don't know, is that the bottle leaching into the water, or is the water already got that stuff in it and it's just showing up when they look for the very, very small. So this
Mhm.
problem is not only a big one, but it's just getting out of hand. It's exceeding our ability to deal with it. And I mean, you can, like I said, you can buy a fancy $3,000 Kangen water machine. It's going to do better than most, but nothing is filtering at the nano level.
Yeah, I think the smallest I've ever heard is like so many microns. They can kind of filter out a couple of microns in size,
Yeah.
but that you need like a multi-layered filtration system that includes not just like UV lights and like several different types of these filters. They get smaller and smaller, or they more refined and more refined as they go through the filtration system, but they do not go to the nano level. I think what is a micron? I see here a
It's a
nanometer.
millionth of a centimeter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a millionth of a centimeter, or 1,000 times smaller. A nanometer is 1,000 times smaller than a micron. So they're not going to get that. I don't even know how
Yeah,
you could possibly get that, but you
that's
can
right. Yeah.
change. They could change the way they process these types of things, but as you mentioned, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
It's come on, man, come on,
And
guys.
there, just by the very nature of manufacturing some products, there's gonna be stuff in it. There's gonna be one millionth of a rat turd
Yeah.
in that grain. Like, there has to be provisions for that. Like, you know what I mean? And the FDA has to set limits
Yeah.
on how many dead rats are allowed to go in a vat of waste paste about to become hot dogs. Or we're gonna show you probably in the second half
Oh,
by the time we get to it, but I'm gonna
yeah.
show
Well,
you
hold
what's in
real
hot
quick.
dogs
Just,
and
I
what's
just,
in those fast
yeah.
food burgers.
Trigger warning for anybody who does have a sensitivity to knowing how terrible the food supply is. This is going to be quite disturbing. I just want to be upfront here. but it is important, and you probably should at least know so you can try to make better decisions. And even more important, when you have the chance to make to participate in whether it be the democratic process of any nation that you're from, because I know you're from Canada. We know some people from over the pond, as they say.
Yeah.
This information can help you make better decisions about who you want in power.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just
we're not just gonna show you the problem and be like, well, now that you know, you're screwed. Good luck
yeah.
eating a solid meal from now on. We're gonna
See ya.
give you real practical steps. Marquise is
Yeah.
gonna spearhead that.
Yeah.
What can we do? We are not doomed. But if you don't know, you don't know what to look out for. Education and knowledge is power. That's the whole point of doing this. We learned, and we're science buffs already. The average person is not paying attention to this, and we're giving way too much trust to the companies that we think are in fact taking care of it. And here are 3 shocking FDA allowances. The graphic stuff is going to be later. I'll give everybody the warning if you don't want to see, how hot dogs are made. But these are things that the FDA approved certain limits on to be in your food.
Here are 3 shocking things that the FDA allows in the food you eat. You can get up to 10 milligrams of mouse poop in 1 pound of cocoa beans. Up to 400 insect fragments per jar of ground cinnamon. And you can have up to 1 maggot in each can of canned tomatoes.
I guess one's not that bad.
Yeah, I think those flies were getting busy, by the way.
Man. And they're not even just like flies, it's fragments. It's like blended up insects.
Oh my gosh. I do understand, like, some of processing certain types of the whole process of creating foods, and especially in the industrial age where we're mass producing these types of things. I can understand how it could be difficult, but it's not impossible. And we can talk about that a little bit later.
And we're gonna show you that the label may not be your friend. I mean, just quickly, here's an EU, America label, a Canada, US label, countries that are okay with GMO or not. So we're gonna break that all down. And depending where you live, you can take a little bit out of it. But I wanted to sort of summarize some of the major toxins that appear in a lot of things, sort of the big hitters and things you need to pay attention to. Of course, the first one is bisphenol A, also known as BPA. You might see a lot of baby water bottles in the grocery store saying BPA free. Human, of course, adult water bottles as well. So essentially, it's found in plastic containers. Studies have shown that BPA can leach out and into the food or the beverage inside. It is an estrogen. The chemical BPA mimics estrogen, and it binds to those receptors. So essentially, it can disrupt your hormone function. And although they've done more studies on pregnant women in this, essentially BPA exposure leads to problems with reproduction, increases future breast and prostate cancer risk of a developing fetus. Like the kid is already developing a precursor to having colon or a prostate cancer at 50. He's going to get it at 20, and it happened in uterine, all because of a stupid water bottle that we didn't know was going to cause these problems. Other things have also said BPA levels can affect your insulin resistance for type 2 diabetes, hence the obesity problem that's not helping. So there are a lot of things that have been removed where they say BPA free. But if you're buying a water bottle on Amazon or on, like Temu or I don't know, Wish, this stuff's coming out of China. If it's a $1.50 water bottle, I guarantee you it is not BPA free. It is made the cheapest possible way it can.
Yeah.
If it doesn't say, then assume it's in there. It would be my advice. And even plastic wrap on foods, the same idea. This BPA can leach out of that. And depending on the brand, I know there are some regulations. Canada's pretty strict with that. Nobody can sell BPA plastic. But again, if you're buying stuff in different parts of the world that isn't as strict, or if you're buying things online, they kind of circumvent the regulation, even though they're not supposed to. Another big one is artificial trans fats. Essentially, you pump hydrogen into a heavy unsaturated oil, something like soybean or corn oil, turns them solid. So that's how you make like margarine, certain snack foods, baked goods. But basically, trans fat and artificial trans fat causes inflammation, and it definitely has negative effects on heart health. A lot of places have banned artificial trans fats, but there are naturally occurring trans fats that you have to be aware of either. There's your good fat and your bad fat, right? And when you get your cholesterol measured, you have an HDL and an LDL. You want to have one of them higher than the other, meaning you're predominantly, rich in the good fats, the fats you get from like olive oils or avocados or, omega rich type things. Whereas opposed to like, just beef or pork lard or, canola oil, stuff like that. That's the wrong kind of oil, especially palm oil. Palm oil is in everything. Be really careful. Like kids' crackers, cookies, everything you buy in the box processed just for shelf life and stability reasons. Palm oil seems to be in it. Also, if you're an environmentalist, a lot of places in the world, particularly the Amazon, they are cutting down natural forest
Mhm.
and doing what's called monoculture, where you only plant one type of tree or vegetable or whatever. And it's literally hundreds of acres of just palm oil trees only.
You know,
And it has a lot of environmental effects around the world, not to mention it's
yeah,
horrible for you. And
yeah.
it's going on pretty much. Nobody's really doing anything about it. Have you heard much about these trans fats and things like that,
Yeah,
Marquise?
I've heard about not just trans fats, but especially when it comes to like deforestation and the environmental impacts of some of these. We haven't even gotten into. I'm not sure if we're gonna get too much into how pollutants within the soil, which we kind of mentioned a little bit when you talked about how there's gas that leaks into the soil, and
Yeah.
then of course that gets absorbed by some of the crops. There's a lot. I can't. I honestly, it's a little bit overwhelming about how many things are essentially bombarding our biology at any given time, whether it be through the air or through ingesting it, or even from taking a shower or washing your hands. Because as you know, when you take a shower, you absorb more from the shower than you do from drinking some water or any kind of substance. Just to kind of pull
Yeah.
that out there. But also the fact that we believe there are some people who believe that you can just chop all the trees down, plant anything you want to, and everything will be fine because the earth has been here. And listen,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the whole religious aspect of it, but there are some people who believe that because God made the earth, we don't have to worry about taking care of it. We can do whatever we want to it. And but you know what? Who cares if we destroy it because God can fix it or
Yeah.
the earth to fix itself. I'm not gonna make any judgments on that. I will say that that's I believe it may be a bit short-sighted in terms of potential extinction from all this, all these environmental negative impacts that we have on this planet. We should take care of it. This is the planet that we live on. We should take care of it. We
Yeah.
shouldn't be pillaging it and just lousing up the resources for our own gain, essentially.
Yeah.
Those are
There's more to the jungle than just the trees. It's a network, it's a biome, it's an organism. There's fungal mycelium. It's an interwoven microsystem. You just can't cut that down and say, well, I planted trees. They don't have the same oxygen and CO2 reproduction rates of other rainforest trees. They don't have the same medicinal property. Most of the
no,
pharmaceuticals have come from some plant and usually somewhere in the Amazon with the abundance of species. And there's literally thousands of species they haven't even discovered yet. So there could be cures for common diseases that we need that are getting
mhm,
bulldozed in the Amazon right now. We will
yep,
never find it.
yep,
So
yep,
like the earth provides everything we need. If we don't take it and burn it, like it's our own stupidity. If somebody gives you the key to the castle and you just throw it in the ocean, like, okay, well then you made your bed. That's what we're doing, and
I just want to kick the door down. That's what they say.
and it's hard to accept blame or to take on, any type of responsibility or to get fired up and say, I can do this because we didn't create this ourselves. This is not our problem. We didn't make it. But if we don't make it our problem somehow, if we don't start educating ourselves, making
Yeah,
different decisions, companies are driven by money. So if we make it less profitable to do certain things and say, I'm not going to buy that anymore, they'll
they'll
stop making
change.
it because
They'll
not
change.
selling. So like they just want your money. If it's not clear and there's nobody shouting from the windows saying this has got to stop, we're just going about our day to day and thinking everything's good. And especially at a time of inflation where groceries have never cost more than they do right now, to find out that half of that stuff is garbage, they're cheapening the product to make more money, and then they're raising the price that you have to go and work twice as hard or two jobs just to be able to buy that same stuff, right? It's
Yeah,
a bit of a fix. I get upset about it because you do these kind of deep dives, which we always do. You research this, you start to see patterns, you start to see systematic negligence, you start to see companies doing bare minimums, and then you look at their profit sheets. You're like, you made how much money? And you rape the planet and you
yeah.
poison the people, and that's okay. Like, so that's why we do this, is to inspire, educate, and that's enough philanthropy for
That's
me
I'm
today.
pontificating.
Number
Okay.
3. I'm not even going to pronounce that. I think it's polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. So they're usually considered to be environmental pollutants. It comes from burning organic material, but this is actually what happens when you cook a steak. People have heard, hey, don't char the hell out of your steak because that black soot is a cancer-causing agent. And it's true. Even the smoke from the fat hitting the coals contains this PAH. And, they've tested grilled chicken, fish, and meat to see it existed in all three. It's basically found in a lot of processed foods as well, but it is toxic. It is linked to an increase of breast, kidney, colon, and prostate cancer. People recommend other cooking methods, braising, slow cooking, and you can reduce PAH by as much as 89% when you grill, minimizing smoke and quickly removing the droppings. So like get it out of the smoke. And in fact, smoked meats, you're bathing it in PAH. And then if you look at what you're smoking, if that pork has nitrates in it, which we'll get into, you're essentially making a chemical recipe for cancer, particularly gastric cancer in your stomach, your colon. It is a toxic time bomb happening in your guts, right? And you may not even know it just because you bought a cool Traeger smoker for Christmas. It may be poisoning you and you don't even realize it. You're taking soot, you're taking hydrocarbons formed from burning organic matter, and you're bathing your meat in it for 8 hours. And then you're like, I'm going to eat that crusty bark. That's got all the flavor, right? You're literally putting it straight into your body. So yeah, another one I couldn't believe, cinnamon. Most cinnamon out there is toxic. I know that sounds crazy. You can fact check me on this, do your own research, but it has something in it called coumarin. It's a toxic compound. At high doses, it's linked to increased risk of cancer, liver damage, and it is impossible to know how much coumarin your cinnamon contains. In fact, they did a study. Most of the cinnamons they bought at the store all had it. The only way to avoid it is you got to buy a different kind of cinnamon, either called Ceylon or true cinnamon. It comes from a different variation of the plant. It's hard to find. Most stores don't have it. You might have to order it online. But if your kid's eating, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, or you're sprinkling cinnamon on your toast in the mornings, you should know that it is contained. There's a cancer-causing chemical in cinnamon, and there's no warning label. Last time I checked, cinnamon doesn't say, "Hey, just so you know, this has been known to cause cancer."
And cancer, liver, and kidney issues. We know that it's like a small amount, which is why they can get past the FDA, because
That's right.
they're in such small amounts that unless you're taking in what appear like tons of cinnamon like every day, you're at less of or at less of a risk than you think than you might be.
It goes through that GRAS condition, right? Generally, what is it? Generally regarded as safe.
Generally recognized as safe.
Recognized as safe.
Generally
So,
recognized
because
as
they
safe.
realize, hey, this isn't a staple. People aren't consuming a gallon of cinnamon a day. Once in a while, here or there, it's like, okay. But there may not be a once in a while. There's some things that even in small doses can do a lot of damage to your body, right? Added sugars, of course, we've heard this. Empty calories. Sugars are in just about everything. And one of the most common things is high fructose corn syrup. Not only does this affect people with diabetes, but it leads to addiction. I got a video I can play on that right now in terms of what having sugar in your body changes the pH. It also makes it more beneficial for disease cells and cancer cells. It makes the environment more ripe for them to grow. So you're feeding bad cell production just by having an overtoxicity of sugar in your body. Even things like gout can happen with a buildup of uric acid. Having too much sugar, or really, sugar at all, is not a good thing. And the scary part about that is it's not even depicted on the labels, which we'll get into in the second half. But I wanted to play a little clip here before we go to our halfway break, just about the food testing, chemical addiction, all that stuff that comes from it. This guy's got a channel, and he can relate to all of those topics. So let's check it out.
You ever wondered what is actually in your food, how it's made, where it comes from, the ingredients? Are they safe or are they not safe? How do you select your foods? Are you someone that just goes to the grocery store, looks at the package, you like the way it looks, or maybe the foods are very colorful, or maybe you have an addiction to it, or you just like it because your family members have been eating it for decades? How do you choose your food, and do you know if it's safe for you or not? Now, if you're someone who says you read a lot of labels, do you actually understand what you're reading? Have you looked up the data gaps? Do you really know how it's tested, if it's safe for human consumption? Or you just assume because it makes it into your foods that is it okay to eat? Well, the fact of the matter is that majority of your additives are tested on animals before approval for consumption. This means they test the toxicity level, Further down, sometimes they test for reproductive harm or carcinogenic, and that's how it is approved in our foods. The data comes from the one who is trying to sell you the product. They hire a scientist. The scientist does these research or writes a research paper up. It is given to a health regulatory like FDA or Health Canada, and they overlook it, and then they set the guidelines for it. Now, keep in mind, this is all based on the trust that the person selling the product has given the correct information and had actually did adequate testing on that product. But we all know people want to make money now and not 30 years from now. So long-term studies are basically never done before approval. It's just put it out there. We got the toxicity level. We know it's safe and animals, and we can eat it. But many people don't realize that behind the scenes, these food industries, these pharmaceutical companies are the ones shaping on how your health is dictated, where you're going to end up, how you're going to get if you're healthy. Now, I don't know if anybody knows what an addiction is like, but I can tell you I've been through every drug addiction. I've been through cigarette addiction, weed addiction, alcohol addiction, junk food addiction. I was a really bad eater at one point in my life. I have changed all that, so I know what it's like to be on the clean side and how to be on the rough side. Now, when compared to crack or coke or any of those hardcore drugs that people take, the way that the drug makes us feel and makes us do the actions we don't want to, but is manipulating our brain, don't think for 1 second that the same thing is not happening from the chemicals in your foods. This is why every Friday night you go back for the same bag of chips, or you order a large pizza. You get into that mindset. You are chemically altered. You are being persuaded into buying something, and that is called an addiction. Now, a lot of people will argue that, especially in my live shows, that we are not the same as animals. We don't eat the same. We don't digest the same. We respond to chemicals and diseases differently. So at the end of the day, when you really look at these animal studies that they have tested on animals for the food additives for us to consume, that it is toxic to them at a certain level, how can we say it's the same for us? Now, a lot of you will say, well, it's kind of a guideline. Okay, I get it. So when they come out with cancer studies or reproductive harm studies or neurological studies or DNA damage studies, and someone like myself or someone else who is researching these additives brings it to light and says, listen, this causes cancer, everyone gets in defense mode and says, well, we're not animals. It doesn't apply to us. So how can it apply for the safety in our foods by testing on animals? But when it comes to proving in animals that it's harmful to animals, we can't use that to apply the same ideology to us being safe or being able to consume it and not get sick. I really think, and this goes for researchers and these big companies, that people that eat, additives or junk food or pop or candy, or even people that eat meat, they defend it. And that's when an addiction, an addictive personality comes into play. Now, I'm not knocking anybody who eats meat out there, okay? I am a plant eater. I've switched eating plants just over 3 years ago, and it has saved my life and changed my whole entire body like you wouldn't believe. So don't think for 1 second, I have never been on your side of the fence, and I was never addicted, and I never thought that way. And don't think for 1 second that I don't know, and I am not an expert on addictions, because I am. I'm an expert on addictions. I've been there. I lived through it. I know how it feels to get off of it. I know the mindset you have to be to get off of it. And I know how it can manipulate your brain and make you want to do things you don't want to do. So the fact of the reality is you're being manipulated with the foods you're eating. We should demand transparency. We should demand comprehensive research on the combination of additives, which has barely been done. It's barely even been touched or even looked at. When you shop and you throw all these products into your cart, including your hair care products, your body care products, and you get to the cash register, you pay for it, and you go home, you got a list of 400 additives in your bags, in your kitchen, in your washroom. The combination of all those additives in different sequences and different amounts has never been studied. But yet people want to pull out the toxicity levels in animal studies on just that additive alone in hopefully a clean body. I'm sorry, but science does not work out that way. So please join me in my movement in trying to raise awareness and change the future of our generations to come and what they consume and the health. I mean, doesn't your bloodline matter? Growing your family bloodline and growing it to prosperity or abundance or health. We all know that health is wealth. Being healthy allows you to do more things in life. It allows you to live longer. It allows you to protect your children longer. When are we all going to realize it's time to act now? Visit my...
This is first of all, I really appreciate his story. That was touching. That was actually personal because I've had family members and I've had friends who dealt with addiction. I think everybody pretty much knows somebody who's dealt with addiction. There was an opioid crisis in the U.S. that was and still is a problem, especially in certain communities. It's terrible. The addiction is terrible. So I appreciate that he was open and honest about that, giving us an idea of where he comes from and how he's likening some of these types of additives to addiction, to actual drug addiction. I've heard this before. So
I mean, this is just a small list of some of the additives and what they're used for. It's everything from anti-caking agents, antioxidants, artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, food acids, humectants, which are even chemicals that give humidity or maintain humidity so you don't get like dry, stale cookies, things like that. Artificial flavors, flavor enhancers, foaming agents, mineral salts, preservatives, thickeners, vegetable gums, stabilizers, glazing agents. I mean, it goes on and on. Propellants. So this is, there's a lot of stuff there. And he made a great point. This is just food. Talk about your
just
shampoo, your hand soap, the clothes you wear, what kind of dish soap you're using, what kind of laundry detergent, you're using fabric softener. The cocktail of chemicals that we bathe ourselves in every day is what is causing these epigenetic changes in people. Kids in their 20s having kidney failure and stuff like that. It's not everybody that's going to get that. But if you're one of those people that could, and you're kind of borderline, chances are this could push you over the edge and you will develop these things that, by all accounts, somebody shouldn't get at that age. Well, when you're born in a toxic bath, the very first sip of breast milk is the accumulation of all the toxic lead and metals and everything that mom has had in her body her entire life. Yes, baby needs a colostrum for, gut health reasons, for immune system reasons. Every animal, the babies, when you watch those, I like animal rescue shows, and they'll
yeah,
rescue like a baby deer whose mom got hit by a car. If the baby didn't get its first milk, almost never survives. But the ones that
man.
got that colostrum, they now have those antibodies and the immunity. But the colostrum is now being contaminated with these forever chemicals and heavy metals that we've never had to deal with before. And again, nobody's doing long-term studies on this stuff. And it basically comes down to you, the consumer, now more than ever, to do your own work, do your own homework, learn about this stuff. Don't just go about your day blindly. There are choices you can make. There are other brands that see that, hey, people are starting to wake up. Yeah, it might be $1 more for that box of cookies, but it might have 80% less garbage in it. And this isn't about one exposure. These are things we eat and consume daily, right? It's add up
Right.
the exposures daily, weekly, monthly over the course of your life. You've literally put millions and millions of things in your body, and they don't all come out as nicely as we would like. So,
Yeah, I was going to say Robert Sapolsky, who was a philosopher and scientist and college professor who talks about the idea that there is no free will. He believes that free will is an illusion. I don't necessarily agree with him on that. I do think that free will is an illusion to an extent. The extent of which our free will it appears to be, it's not what we think it is. We have less free will, if you will, no pun intended, than you think. Yes, we have the free will to get up in the morning when we want to. You think we can go brush our teeth this way instead of that way, or we can do whatever we want to in very small ways. But when it comes to big decisions like who are you, how do you think, how do you feel, what kind of person will you become, what's your moral framework going to be? Those things, they are very difficult to autonomously develop on your own, nearly impossible given that there's not just the media manipulation that's going on, and I mean movies and television and news and advertising and all that stuff like that. That's all trying to manipulate who you are on the inside, but also what you're putting into your body.
yeah.
And so this is such a great. I mean, it's a great topic. It's a little bit morbid, I understand, but it's essential. So
Well, I mean, think about it. These companies are spending money on advertising and commercials rather than putting that money into, like, they're making those products cheaper by using those chemicals that aren't good for us. So it's a money
right,
saving thing. But then you go spend 5 million a year in ads. So it's all about marketing, not about the product. So
it's
don't
great.
buy it because it looks cool or they had a celebrity. Do your own research. Most celebrities don't care. They want the check. If you want,
Yeah.
if you got a new product and you want to launch it, and you want to, have a big party and get the media there and photos, you could pay a celebrity 250 grand, somebody like Paris Hilton or of that caliber. They'll show up at your party, eat and drink and socialize, and everybody will think, wow, like, look at all the celebrities at this thing. and they do that for fundraising. They do it
Yep.
for charities.
Yep.
Sometimes it's good and these people want to help, but those celebrities aren't always there because they're for the movement. They're there because they're getting paid to be there. So don't buy the marketing that these companies are just throwing down your throat. What are they actually making? Who cares if your favorite basketball or baseball players on the box of Wheaties? What is in the box of Wheaties? And I haven't done the math on what's in the box of Wheaties, so I don't know. But most cereal is fortified, and we're going to show you what it's fortified with in the second half. So the deep dive will get even deeper. We're going to take our 5-minute break. Everybody refill those drinks, get your snacks. Chat room's on fire tonight. We love reading your guys' comments.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
Thanks again for all the support and love. We love you guys right back. We're doing these shows for you. So we'll see everybody in 5 minutes, and we'll get right back into it. And we are back with the second half of Quantum Ladder Podcast, talking about what is in our food. And we've gone over some of the just sort of basic additives, things to watch out for, giving you sort of an idea of the games and the play, and don't put too much credence in what the FDA approves or doesn't approve. So a couple other things I wanted to get into before I explain labels and things like that. So we'll go through these quickly here. We talked about food additives. The list is a mile long. Some of the basic, most common reactions people have are digestive disorders, colicky pains in children, diarrhea, nervous disorders, hyperactivity, insomnia, irritability, respiratory problems, skin problems, anybody that has eczema. My daughter has eczema as a 2.5-year-old, and certain
Same,
foods
yeah.
we give her have flared that up, right? So
Same,
we become more. Have you experienced anything like that? Young people being more sensitive?
Yeah. My youngest daughter, I don't know what it is exactly yet, because we have a very limited and strict diet for her, but something is causing her to break out in this rash occasionally. And I know for sure that one of her clothes, ironically, there's 2 outfits that are of the same material, and I can't remember what it's called at the moment. But every time we put them on her, she itches constantly.
Yeah.
And we didn't recognize what was going on at first. We just thought she naturally had it, but there are certain things that actually they kind of cause it to break out.
Yeah, if you look at clothing labels, it's essentially plastic for the most part, right? You have polyesters and you have nylons and rayons and all that. It's synthetic plastic, and these things break down into tiny little fibers in the dryer,
Yeah.
and they get into our body, right? And so it's like you don't have to just worry about it through your water, your food. It's your clothing, it's the chemicals, like the clothing itself. Natural fibers like hemp or cotton tend to be, better for skin, more biodegradable and less toxic for that reason. But if the pesticide residue is left on the cotton and the cotton itself is contaminated, and there are organic cottons for that very reason, right? So another big thing that we talked about earlier was BPA, so biphenol. And again, we mentioned that acts like a hormone, an estrogen interrupter, can interfere with puberty. It can increase body fat, cause problems with your immune and nervous system. And this is found in the lining of soda cans. And plastics with the number 3 or 7. Cash register receipts have it, that sort of slippery plasticky paper you get. Plastic baby bottles, sippy cups. It's been banned, like I said, in North America, but be careful if you're buying online. Another big one is phthalates. These exist a lot in shampoos. The same thing, they act like hormone or endocrine disruptors. They're found in packaging, garden hoses, inflatable toys, nail polish, hairspray, lotion, fragrance. I mean, the cosmetic industry is loaded with phthalates. And there is a movement of, I know my wife's very conscious of when she was pregnant, what kind of makeup she used for that exact reason.
Yep.
And then you have the, I'm going to try to pronounce this, perfluoroalkyl chemicals, PFCs. These are the forever chemicals that we cannot get out of our body. And they lead to things like low birth weight in babies, problems with your immune system, thyroid, fertility. They are commonly found in things like grease-proof paper, cardboard packaging, household products like water repellent fabrics, nonstick frying pans. If your nonstick pan starting to peel, throw it out. Teflon is toxic, and it's full of these PFCs. Perchlorate is also similarly chemical, structure-wise, interferes with your thyroid, disrupts brain development. It's even in some dry food packaging. So apparently it decreases static. So that's why they use it. I mean, it could kill you, but you won't have any static in your chips.
Wow. Wow.
This is what I mean. These companies have a certain amount of leeway to do what they want to do, and there's no oversight, Artificial food color is a big one. This only came out, I would say, maybe I just noticed it in the last decade or so, but I know it hasn't been forever. But there's a link between some food colorings and hyperactivity, ADHD. So it could be from the coloring in your kid's cereal that your kid acts that way and you can't figure it out. And what happens? We go to the medical industry. They go, hey, we need to medicate this kid. And now you're going to have the side effects of big pharma for the rest of your life. In a young and developing body, it could go right back to the stupid food coloring in the cookies they're eating or the colored cereal that they're having, like Fruit Loops and stuff like that. That's all artificial colors. And a few of them are worse than others. Like there's they have numbers. I think red 40 and yellow 5 are the worst.
Red dye 40 and yellow dye. Whatever I don't remember what the number is again, but yeah, those are terrible.
Nitrite, this is something that you're going to find in bacon or smoked meats, deli meats. Can interfere with your thyroid, your blood's ability to deliver oxygen, increase risk of certain cancers. and they use nitrates and everything from packaged hot dogs, deli meat. When you get pre-sliced meat in the package, it's got to have a shelf life, right? It's just like any deli meat that if it went bad in 2 days, they'd be throwing the whole deli case every couple of days. So to extend that, things are cured in salt and nitrates. Well, that and the combination of other things and an unhealthy lifestyle other ways, and you could have major problems, right? And let's give some examples of everyday items that you should probably watch out for. Let's start with bread. Cancer-causing agents lurking in bread. This is potassium bromate.
Yep.
So it's a carcinogen. It's added to the flour. It's banned in several countries, including Brazil, Canada, Europe, and the UK. It is not banned in the United States. So, I mean, despite health concerns, the levels are still there in U.S. bread, and the FDA has not adjusted the level since 1973. So any new discoveries in the world of food science, and hey, this isn't really that good for you, they haven't even revisited it. So there's no need for the company to do anything because they're still within regulation. Like I can see it from the company's point of view, like, what, we're just going to burn money? Like, no, make it the law and then we'll have no choice. That's just how corporations work. But if there's the fact that anything has a 1-year-old limit on it, come on. What have we learned in 51 years?
Oh my gosh.
How did we eat and drink 51 years ago? What was our life expectancy? What was the average age? Like, come on. How does FDA not take that into account, you know? And again, these are endocrine disruptors. That potassium bromate is essentially, it's going to screw up your kid's puberty. Here's 2 other bad chemicals, BHA and BHT. I have them here. So BHA, I'm going to do my best. Butylated hydroxyanisole, and BHT is butylated hydroxytoluene. Sounds like a planet from Star Wars, Toluene. But Crunch, Apple Crunch and Apple Jack cereal contain this stuff. And they come from a variety of manufacturers, but there's a list of over 10,000 food additives that are allowed for use. These chemicals weren't really scrutinized, but be careful with Captain Crunch and Apple Jacks. They, for whatever reason, have a higher percentage of this stuff. This one I couldn't believe. Pop-Tarts. It's not the Pop-Tarts, the friggin' package. This preservative used in Pop-Tarts and hundreds of popular foods may harm the immune system. That is what is called TBHQ. I'm not going to even guess at what the hell it is. Essentially, it's a preservative. It's pervasive in processed foods. It serves no function other than increasing shelf life. So you have the packaging that has BHT and BHA, and then you have preservatives inside, and they basically affect your immune cells' proteins at doses similar to cause harm in traditional studies. TBHQ might influence how well vaccines work and maybe linked to a rise in food allergies. I kind of went down that rabbit hole of food allergies, and I found a clip here. Hopefully I can find the guy. Yeah, allergies and asthma. So this doesn't just come down to how you feel or things like surface level, like skin irritations or whatever, or even long-term effects. We may even have, as a result of heavy metals and toxicity, an increase in certain allergies. And again, nobody's doing the work on this, very few, and it's hard to find accurate information because there's so few and far between people bringing out credible stuff. There's a lot of garbage out there too. So researcher beware, but check out this guy's opinion on allergies as a result of our toxic food.
That all of these companies are feeding babies toxic heavy metals in extreme.
Peanut allergies and asthma actually can be traced back to the excessive amount of heavy metals in baby formulas. My nutrition teacher in university actually used to talk about this all the time because he was one of the people who pointed this out to the FDA. I'm specifically referring to the excessive amount of iron in babies' food. And this is going to be very confusing to people because iron is a necessity for babies' development. Their brains and their lungs and everything about their body needs iron. And breast milk just does not cut it, generally speaking. A mother cannot provide enough iron for the baby's cognitive development. But we're overdoing it and hurting these little guys. High iron levels increases the severity of asthma, so much so that over the last 25 years, the CDC says the prevalence of asthma is up over 300%. 1 in 12 people, or 25 million Americans, have asthma, and that number is increasing every single year. It costs $56 billion annually just to treat this one disease. And if you're new to this channel, let me just say one thing. Where there is a cost, there is a profit. If it's costing US citizens $56 billion annually, that means someone else is profiting $56 billion annually. If Big Pharma is getting so much revenue from something as simple as asthma or allergies because they're both linked in the body, where is the incentive to do something about it? There just isn't one. The studies I just showed you guys are from 2003 and 2015. It's 10 and 20 years ago. We've known this relationship exists for decades, and yet they are not doing anything about it. And that's just iron. We didn't even talk about the other heavy metals that are in baby food that just plain and simple should not be allowed. But the FDA is not regulating that. It's up to the companies to set the thresholds. That's ridiculous. Don't be fooled. There's a reason why the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is in charge of both the food supply and the drug supply in America. They go hand in hand.
Oh man, I really hope that people. I hope you guys are paying attention to this because I know how things can be when it comes to how we view what problems are, like the hierarchy of problems. What do we consider the most problematic thing? A lot of people would say, oh well, I think that the political atmosphere is important, and then there's the nature of our social and cultural issues, and then there's but I kind of feel like the pyramid is upside down. I mean, it's what you're eating, it's what you're feeding your children. Right.
Yeah.
The biggest one, which is the most important thing, because that generation, we are essentially, and yes, we do live longer and longer every generation, by the way. For the most part, we have lived longer and longer for hundreds of years now. Our life expectancy has increased dramatically. However, that does not mean that we are healthier at all. And it starts at infancy. I really appreciate that he's pointing out these facts.
Yeah, well, we did our nature versus nurture, and we talked about epigenetic and how it's not
Right.
just the things that you do in your life and the choices you make. It goes back to you being in uterine in your mother's belly, the choices she made, what chemicals she was exposed to at that point. And some have even done work. I think Deepak Chopra was the one that we ran a clip of, and he said it could go back as far as 7 generations. So it's almost like, well, how does a kid have all these problems and sensitivities? We ate those same foods. Why is there not some sort of, resilience built within them? It might just mean that their toxic level is so high that they only need this much more to start displaying symptoms. Whereas we were born with a cleaner slate. It took us a lifetime to get to that level, but we've passed it to them through epigenetics and through just the act of reproduction, that these kids are born with more junk in their bodies now than ever before. I saw a documentary the other day. He was talking about air pollution, and it was a thoracic surgeon in India. And he says, I don't see pink lungs anymore. Even if it's a child and I'm doing open, lungs or whatever surgery, they're a grayish color. The average person in whatever city that was in is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes every day because the air quality is so bad. There are no more pink lungs, even in kids. So what does that mean? That's like every mom smoking every time they're pregnant for generations, not just a few people here and there. What's that going to look like in 40 years? And these people are not knowingly, they don't know what's happening, and they don't really have a choice. They're stuck just kind of living in that. And heavy metals is a big part of that. When we burn hydrocarbons, the byproduct, and the biggest change over the last, 50 years or whatever was removing unleaded gasoline. I think it was 1969 or 1970. They said you can't put lead in the gas. That's why if you buy like a 69 Corvette, it's worth a fortune, because it had all the power. As soon as they unleaded the gas, all these companies took them a few years to figure out how the hell do we get all this horsepower back again. So there's a few generations of muscle car that are garbage right around that 70, 71, 72. Correct me, I'm not a gearhead in the muscle cars as much as sort of European cars, but there was a definite change. But the reason they did it was lead was literally coming out in the form of soot and air pollution and landing on everything. People, the air we breathe, the food we're growing. Heavy metals is a big problem. And I've got a little article from the news here, just explaining it a little further.
Lead, arsenic, mercury, and cadmium.
Heavy metals many manufacturers of baby food don't test for. But a nonprofit out of Colorado wanted to know what's hiding behind the labels.
What are we actually feeding America's most vulnerable population?
Every single baby food sample went through this machine.
This is Ellipse Analytics, an accredited lab in Denver, Colorado. We traveled there to get an exclusive look at test results.
There's a lack of knowledge when it comes to what's actually in these products.
Sean Callan is the lab's director of operations and quality. To help parents make better choices, Ellipse Analytics teamed up with the nonprofit Clean Label Project and tested for toxins in 700 products.
The infant formula did better.
In general, yeah.
Ranging from baby to early toddler food. Some of the results shocked Callan, like finding lead in infant formula. 35% of the formula samples tested positive for some level of lead.
I mean, that's an alarming level, particularly when we consider the effect that lead has on developing brains.
When it comes to formula, Similac and Enfamil had products that tested in the top 5 for purity, but one Enfamil formula is ranked in the bottom 5. And the lab found a chemical linked to cancer and brain damage in some food samples.
It's what you call a cumulative toxin.
The levels of acrylamide varied depending on the food.
Is a tiny amount of it going to hurt you right now? No. But a tiny amount of it over and over and over again, that's a different story.
The lab screened for 130 different environmental contaminants, from heavy metals and pesticides to antibiotics.
Science doesn't lie.
Jacqueline Bowen is the executive director of Clean Label Project. The nonprofit is focused on health and transparency when it comes to product labels. She says brands usually only test for traditional food contaminants.
Things like E. coli, salmonella, listeria.
Bowen believes that testing should be more extensive. She hopes what the lab discovered in baby food results in a call to action.
The wake-up call for brands that they need to be much more diligent. They can go, wee.
Local mom Laura Temke works in the food safety industry.
What a label tells you is questionable sometimes.
She realizes we don't know everything that's in our food, but even Laura was shocked when we shared some of the test results, especially when it comes to organic products. According to the lab, the samples tested averaged twice as much arsenic as conventional baby food.
It's crazy, actually. You think I'm buying organic, it's free from chemicals and impurities and things.
The toxic substance also showed up in a popular kids snack.
You want puffs?
Many brands make puffs. Test results show some had higher levels of arsenic than others.
It's a little scary.
So is bisphenol A, or BPA. One of the brands Laura buys makes a BPA-free claim, but the lab found the industrial chemical in several of the Happy Family products.
They lie. They be lying.
Come on, what are we doing? Lead and arsenic and baby food? Like, seriously? Is this like, not too much of a conspiracy guy, but it seems like there's a lot of money to be made off of sick people. If we could start them off sick at an earlier age, that'd be great. We could have customers for life, Like, what are we doing?
Lifetime consumers. Lifetime consumers.
Man.
It's sick. And again, I think that when we talk about, we'll talk about more about what I really feel in some of the in the Patreon side of things, but
yeah,
really it bothers me that we focus on the wrong issues instead of the right ones. And this is one of the right issues to be focused on. I would love to see people storm on a corporation and be like, stop feeding our children arsenic and lead and stop putting I'd like this. That would be great to see.
Yeah. Like, people are calling for immediate action. Like, there's a loophole in the system. This wasn't happening when you wrote the original regulations. Stop everything like right now and fix this is a major problem. And, they talk about labels. Let's get into labels. So this started with our good friend, Scott Rosen, who's a Quantum Club member, and he's a contributor to our show. He helps us with some research and stuff like that. He sent me a screenshot of a can of chili from the United States. And he goes, hey, do you guys have like sugar like percentages on yours? I'm like, yeah, it's gotta be. We got everything. And he's like, well, it'll show you all the different percentages. I'll give you an example here. So this is Canada and the US. Now this slide, actually, they're proposing a new label that would fix some of these issues, but the Canadian labels are closer to the way they are on the right. American labels are on the left. So everything in Canada has to have a grams of your, how many in the serving and your daily percentage values. Everything has to have some value. And this picture of chili that Scott sent me, it just said, like 4 grams of sugar, but there's no percentage. So look at the slide on the left, sugars, and this, whatever label this is for, sugars, 12 grams, but what's the percentage? How do you know if 12 grams is too much or not enough, or if you're doing good or not?
Yeah.
You don't have a percentage. And his theory, and I'm starting to believe it too, there's a bit of a conspiracy.
It's
People
not a
that are
conspiracy, it's
diabetic
true.
and overweight
Yeah.
wind up, benefiting big pharma a lot. You get sick, you need pills, especially if you're diabetic. That's a lifetime thing. And we've talked about, the CEOs raising the price of insulin like 4,000%.
Thousands of percents.
So
Yeah,
even if you're
percentage.
trying and you don't want to be obese, you don't really know that this label, okay, 12 grams of sugar, is that good? Is that not good? And think about this. Coca-Cola has 44 milligrams or whatever grams of sugar in a can. If you look at a sugar packet, like, you'd have to put in your coffee, each of
It's
those is
grams.
a gram.
Yeah, it's grams. Yeah.
44 of those are in one can of Coca-Cola. The sugar packets wouldn't even fit in the can.
It's
This
like,
is
what?
a industrially refined,
Yep.
you know what I mean? It's a
Not real
chemical,
sugar.
for God's
It's not real
sakes.
sugar. Yeah.
Try holding 44 sugar packets in your hands. I bet you can't do it, but yet it's in every
Yeah.
single can of Coke. And the US is not even telling people, hey, that's like 200% or, 60% of what your daily value should be. And I didn't even know what the Canadian limit on sugar was. So I went and got a can of tomato sauce out of my pantry. It had 3 grams of sugar and it said that was 3%. So I'm assuming based on that easy math, 100 grams a day is sort of the Canadian max. Not saying that that's safe to have 100 milligrams,
No,
which
yeah,
isn't
yeah.
really that much. 2 cans of Coke and an apple and you're over. And not to mention there's naturally occurring sugars
And
in
other
things
things.
you
Yeah.
didn't even think. Foods you're eating that aren't sweet still have high fructose corn syrup with a huge amount of sugar. It's more than just a sweetener, what these sugars are used for. They act as a preserving agent. It's cheaper to manufacture, does less damage to the machinery, less cleanup. There's always a fiscal benefit. There's always some monetary reason why they do that. And so even some of the serving amounts are tampered with. So if you look at like a Canadian and a US label, the serving in Canada, all those are based on like 200 grams. But in the US, it'll look similar percentage wise based on 130 gram serving size. So they're shrinking the numbers on the label by just calling a serving less of that. Now it's got less sugar. If you buy Lipton chicken noodle soup, the instant soup,
Yep.
they
Yep.
make a less sodium version. When you read the instructions, the regular Lipton soup is 4 cups of water to make the soup. The other one is 3 cups of water. So it makes less soup. That's why it's reduced sodium. Yeah, there's probably more MSG and less actual salt, which MSG is not good either.
Oh my
They still
gosh.
don't know
Yeah.
why, but it's, the headaches and digestive issues linked to that. But in some cases, it's only going to make 3 cups of soup, not 4. So compared to regular Lipton, yeah, this is reduced sodium. So they can play with words and they can do this stuff. And marketing is very creative. And that's where there's bulk of their money, not on the product. And a US label, here's an example there. In the US, serving is 100 grams, or sorry, in Europe, a serving might be 100 grams. But in the US, that same serving would be 134 grams. So larger recommended servings than you may need. It's hard to say the food require the recommended, what you should eat every day, all that stuff. It's kind of skewed. Even that hasn't really been updated in many, many years. So, we're supposed to eat so many grams of this and so many grams of that, but that's just based on what somebody said. And it could be based on 40-year-old research, Have you come across any deceiving labels or,
Are you kidding me? All of my labels are deceiving, my friend. Almost all. I mean, the whole idea of like less sugar, that's a funny thing too, because a lot of times they do reduce the serving size or they change the ingredients. Another thing is they'll say things like organic or like naturally flavored,
Yeah.
which is a really good one. Or there are no added sugars to
Right.
something. When
Yeah,
it's like you look at the
it makes it sound like there's no sugar, but it's
looks
straight
like it.
apple juice, already has enough sugar.
Ton of
So
it.
they're just saying no added sugar. Well,
Right.
then why is it so damn sweet? Because it's already in there.
And again, if you look at the labels, pay really close attention to the very first ingredient or the first couple of ingredients, because a lot of times the stuff that you're eating isn't even actually the stuff that you're. It's like in the middle or towards the end of the ingredients list, which are like 50 different things to make up what should be just one.
Yeah.
But all those 50 things are for flavoring, coloring, and preservatives. It's insane. It's insane. It's insane.
Look at how you would make that product the old-fashioned way. Why does this label have all this stuff? So like mayonnaise. What are you talking? Eggs, bit of oil, maybe some mustard or some lemon, and you're going to emulsify it. And that's how you make your mayonnaise. Read a label on a mayonnaise container. It's all things to extend the shelf life. It's all saturated fat oils. It's things like, in fact, Miracle Whip. It was Cool. Yeah, Cool Whip is the whipped cream. Miracle Whip's the mayonnaise stuff, right? So Miracle Whip was actually invented a long time ago when mayonnaise was originally invented. I think it was Heinz or Kraft or somebody who made the original mayonnaise, but the shelf life wasn't there. So they made Miracle Whip to have no eggs whatsoever in it and a heavier concentration of these stable oils. So they wind up getting super popular, Kraft, because they were able to build something and a product that could stay on the shelf for months. But it is liquid plastic. It is not good for you. It is cholesterol in a bottle. It will screw up your good cholesterol and give you more bad cholesterol. That's the problem with some of these things too. They're actually disrupting that healthy balance that you would have from eating more of a natural diet, And
I do wonder a lot of times, like I mentioned this before, but like, I think that the world has a cognitive issue where there are some, and I don't mean like people are necessarily mentally ill, but I mean like people are cognitively challenged. I do not think it's their fault. I do think that people have a very difficult time holding complex ideas in their head, and then at the same time or simultaneously conceptualize, like getting an idea, an understanding of what those ideas really mean, how they connect to the real world. They don't understand their own worldview or their mental model of the world, as they say, and they're not very good critical thinkers at all. It's like most people are just not very good critical thinkers. In the U.S., I believe in like 2015, the average reading level of Americans, of average Americans, was 7th grade, and you could kind of tell, for the most part, by just having a conversation with. Listen, I'm an American, by the way, just so you guys know. The average American does have a very difficult time having an intelligent conversation, or even just having a regular conversation that is sensible. But what's worse is the fact that this is happening to people. These things are happening to people, and if you aren't healthy, mentally, chemically, biologically healthy, or I don't like to use the word normal because I don't think there's no normal. I think normal is relative. You can't make good decisions. You can't. So people are suffering in a lot of ways. There are people they call them lazy, or they call certain people that have hypertension, that have ADHD, which is a very big deal in the US. And they say, oh, it's just how you're born. No, it's not. No, it's not. You're not. I don't. Maybe you were born that way, by the way. Maybe. But that's not like a natural process. It's an abnormality. It's literally an aberrant medical behavior, a medical expression or manifestation. Something is wrong. The question is, where does it come from? And I think that a lot of it, and I mean a lot of it, according to people like Gabriel Mate, who talks about the child development and how that works, and other scientists who study these types of epigenetic changes in people, they are a product of your environment. I am 100% on the side of nature. I think nature is far more influential in our life. It doesn't have to be, and it's not necessarily what it could be different. It could be 50-50, but right now in our civilization, it is not 50-50. It is like almost entirely nurture. And then whatever natural would be, like you walking, talking, eating, sleeping, breathing, that's the natural. But everything else, it's all nurture. Everything.
Even if you're doing your absolute best to raise your kid in a loving, supportive environment, free from trauma, they could have issues just because of their food, their clothing, their shampoo, their soap. Maybe they're more sensitive. Maybe your whole lineage and everybody else's lineage is a toxic cocktail that's inadvertently been passed along. And we just continue giving our kids the same cereals they love because that's all they eat for breakfast. We're happy they're just eating. But this clip I'm going to play, this guy went through a stroll through a grocery store trying to find stuff that wasn't, I think he was looking for GMO or bioengineered food. And it was just about everything he picked up off the shelf. It had it. And again, we need to become a little bit of investigators. This isn't, astrophysics level stuff. But basically, if it's supposed to just have a few simple ingredients and it's got 50, keep walking.
Just plain white rice. When we looked at ingredients and saw that it has a bioengineered ingredients, it made me want to go check other boxed foods. Magic Spoon cereal? Y'all spend $10 on cereal. Contains bioengineered food. Special Cake cereal? Contains bioengineered. Ritz crackers, bioengineered. Goldfish, bioengineered. Oreos, bioengineered. Ladies and gents, eat real food. Stop eating all this garbage processed stuff on the grocery store aisles and take in the right amount of calories. If you don't know what your calorie goal is for fat loss, go use the free calorie calculator, fullertonnutrition.com. Hit the calories with meat, veggies, nuts, seeds, and fruit. I guarantee you within 3 months, you'll have the best results you've ever had starving yourself doing 1,200 calories a day.
Yeah.
I like that, bioengineered. Everybody knows the term GMO now. GMO's bad.
GMO.
Even if you don't know what the hell GMO is, you know it's not good. But
Yeah.
bioengineered is not GMO.
Now,
Same
genetically
thing.
modified organism is what GMO is. Biologically engineered is different. And this is what gets me. Well, there's a lot of things about this specific thing, right? The fact that we have the level of like scientific ingenuity to make something, like to make an ingredient, to make a food product to increase the production of food. And instead of using it to, like, I don't know, feed starving nations, we're using it to increase profits at all cost. By the way, the prime directive, the prime imperative of a corporation is to maximize profits and to minimize loss. Period. The World Economic Forum has just kind of had their thing, and there's a lot of controversy and conspiracy about that. But long story short, they have this vision. They've had this vision of like corporations being so wealthy and generating so much wealth for a nation that they eventually can spread that wealth among the people. Almost like what some people fear. They fear this idea of socialism, which I don't think any ism, whether it be capitalism, whatever, I don't think that there's any one good or bad. I think there needs to be a new system. But either way, the idea of corporations helping people sounds great. It sounds like a good idea. That is not their real intention. That's just not, it's not their intention. It's not their intention. No way.
Definitely not. And we talked about that hyperactivity and food coloring and stuff like that. So an agency in California actually acknowledged that synthetic food dyes, there is a link to hyperactivity and, it's just behavioral issues. And now that you think with that information, the FDA or somebody would say, hey, now that we have data, we're going to make a decision. It's bad enough that they got 50-year-old levels in some categories, but even when presented with information, why does this have to get tied up in red tape? Because, that company that makes that product also makes 5 billion other products. Well, it's Kraft or it's General Mills, so we're not going to yank it. It's a boys club. Everybody's in bed with each other at some level. Previous episodes, we've showed that some of these companies like Nestle, they own everything from the water in your stream to soap. It's not about making good products. It's about making money. And, the food coloring is a bad one. There's a bunch of other issues. So, brain development at a critical age, just 1 milligram of yellow number 5 was enough to affect the most sensitive children. And a single serving of lemonade Gatorade has 3 times the amount. And a single serving of Sunny D had more than 20 times the amount that you're supposed to have of this yellow food coloring. So if you got a hyperactive kid, stop giving them anything yellow with red or yellow food coloring or any food coloring. See if it makes a difference. And it gets worse than that when you start looking at forever chemicals. So food packaging, pizza boxes, food wrappers, takeout containers, microwave popcorn bags, disposable trays, bakery bags, nonstick pans, firefighting foam, outdoor gear, artificial turf, medical equipment, firefighters, like flame retardant clothing has this stuff in it. It's just, I don't know why it ever came in the first place. It must have been an oversight. I'd like to give somebody the benefit of the doubt to say they didn't know. Why would you intentionally put this stuff in there? But maybe they were doing research on a chemical that says, hey, this stuff makes a good fire retardant, but does it leach into the body? Nobody ever really went that far. They just wanted to get it to market. And I am Canadian. So in fact, the Canadian government is taking steps to address these PFAs. There was a report done, I think it was W5 or something on CBC, basically going through the cosmetics world and finding these PFAs. They're in everything from food packaging, nonstick cookware, clothing, cosmetics. But there was no contingency. Like the company only had to prove that their product didn't have it. If it got it from the packaging, like if the lipstick got contaminated with PFAs because of the cylinder, then it was okay to say, well, that's trace contamination. It's not us. We did what we could. We buy our lipstick caps from China. I don't know, something happened, right? Like that's not good enough. And they're making changes in the law. Thank God somebody, probably because it was on TV and 25 million people saw it and made some noise, right? But with the exception of that, you kind of wonder, would they be doing this if somebody wasn't trying to knock their door down and say, hey, time's up?
Yes, they would. And you know what's fun? I'm a little pessimistic on that one, but I will say, there have been some court cases. I can't remember the name, but there was a person that was going to, and there was a couple of cases of this where they were going to essentially whistleblow on some of the practices that they're oh my gosh, I can't. I should have saved that. I didn't save it because I didn't think we were going to talk about that specifically, about specific court cases that have been against someone. Let me just kind of give you a vague memory of this. But this guy, he was going to whistleblow on his company for basically some bad practices that they're using in their food processing, and they fired him. And he claimed, they did it because they fired him because of obviously he was planning on whistleblowing on them. He tried to go to court for it. Long story short, they buried him. He couldn't fight it, and that story buried. Nothing about it. I found an article or two about it, and nothing else. And I had to go to like a very left, like far left wing, kind of a interesting left wing media website to find this. I feel like, and there were others, by the way, there were plenty of others people that have tried to whistleblow on their companies for this, for things like this, and they're reprimanded. They get consequences for telling people, hey, they're putting this stuff in your food, which means even if they do tell you, by the way, people are going to forget. They forget easily. We have like this very repetitive amnesia that not just about like news situations, but also history itself. We forget how bad things can be by letting things happen, by letting things go, by letting little things like one food packaging that's been recalled. By the way, I get an article every week. There's an article that says this product was recalled. This product was recalled. This product was recalled. And not always because there's a contamination, but a lot of times it's because there's something found in it that is bad for you. Yeah. And we just forget, we just let it go. And, I'm going to
walk into a Costco right before the return section. When you first go in, there's a bulletin board on the right. They don't have any flashing lights or anything to draw attention to, but that's a recall notice. I think that's law in Canada, that you have to notify people one way or the other. That's how they do it. They're like, well, we put it on the board. But I was waiting in line for my wife to do a refund one day, and I read some of the stuff, and it was like, yeah, this had metal fragments in it. There was bits of broken glass in that cereal. I mean, Quaker Oats just had a recall in Canada for, I think it's listeria or salmonella. Usually you get that in like spinach or something wet, something that, this is like dried oats. How the hell do you get that kind of, it's because the food lines and the food chains are coming from so many different places. They're sharing machinery and equipments. And, my daughter has a peanut allergy. Anything made in the grocery store, even if they bake bread, it will say may contain, because they're not like sanitizing their metal table. They went from baking butter tarts to now they're making like almond bread. Now they're making regular bread. So everything touches everything. So just to be safe and so they don't get sued, everything is slapped with may contain. So in order for me to get snacks for my daughter, it has to come from a factory that is specifically peanut free. Just so we don't take a chance, we think our food is clean. And you mentioned that, somebody wanted to whistleblow and these guys just tie you up in litigation and bankrupt you.
His name was like Charlie something. Let me see if I can find this guy's name while you're.
Well, and so that, and then the article disappears. So you kind of think, well, that's why they're doing it, because small guys can't compete. Well, no, Harvard did a study on these forever chemicals, mentioning that, they were seriously concerned. They get into our bodies and they don't get out. They're resistant to water, grease, and heat. So even soap can't remove them sometimes. They're in everything: food packaging, clothing, cosmetics, toilet paper. It's linked to high cholesterol, thyroid disease, liver damage, asthma, allergies, reduced vaccine response in children, decreased fertility, newborn deaths, low birth weight, birth defects, and delayed development. I mean, how many more bad things does it need to do before somebody gives a and does something about it?
I found it, by the way. It's It was a lawsuit that was filed under the Food Safety Modernization Act, the FSMA. And in the case, there was a guy, they don't name him in full, probably for safety reasons. They called him Chase. I thought it was Charlie. My apologies. But he was terminated from his job and later pursued a whistleblower claim against the former employer, alleging that the termination was a form of retaliation for his planned disclosure of food safety violations. Following his notification to the company about his intention to file a claim, the company reportedly filed a lawsuit against him, which he claimed were retaliations.
Absolutely.
So they have to say claim.
And even when they settle, they give you a big chunk of money, whether it's severance for wrongful dismissal, because anybody can get fired. They just got to write you a check. And along with that check comes an NDA, so you can't talk about it any further. So most people don't have the balls to do it, and they're going to give you $2 million and you made $15 an hour. You're going to think about your family first. And I'm not even saying I blame the guy who takes the money, like, what are you supposed to do?
What was the movie with, okay, you know the movie Pretty Woman? Let me see that chick's name. Everybody knows her name. I can't think. Julia Roberts. She played in a movie, okay, about a town that was essentially they were all getting cancer at
that Aaron Brockovich.
It was so good.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this actually
it's based
happened.
on a real story, I think, too, right?
It was based on a true story. There was like this company that was so in 1993 was unemployed single mom with 3 children who's recently been injured by a traffic accident. Come to find out, she had some other issues. What is it? The Pacific Gas and Electric Company was the one who was trying to buy her home, and they were trying to buy up the home of other people too, but they didn't, and it was because they wouldn't sell. There was a whole. You got to watch that movie. It was called Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah,
it is it's an amazing movie. It's a fantastic movie. And I really love the plot.
The thing that I find maddening is we're showing you articles and research done by the likes of Harvard, independent studies, breast cancer lobbyist organizations, people doing the research, taking the money, and now doing the work so that they can go to government, lobby, and say, hey, here it is. Here's the study you guys didn't have. Let's do something about it. And I was really upset to find out that many of the levels, even though the FDA knows, levels haven't changed. Toxic levels are pretty well exactly the same as they were. Here's a clip explaining it. And something is wrong. This has to stop. It really does.
There's important news for parents tonight about baby food. 5 years after Consumer Reports found toxic metals like lead and arsenic in more than 30 baby foods, researchers at the organization say the overall risk has barely changed. Several products actually contain the same or even higher levels now than they did 5 years ago, including Beechnut Naturals sweet potato and Gerber chicken and rice and turkey and rice dinners. Researchers recommend feeding your child less than half a serving of these products per day. In a statement, Gerber notes that these metals occur naturally and says the best way to address the issue is to focus on improvement with suppliers and growers. We have not heard back from Beechnut about our request for comment.
They did nothing. 5 years. They gave them the data. They did nothing.
Yeah, we have. When I found out about this, by the way, about a year and a half ago, I knew because we had already bought a bunch of this stuff for whenever my daughter was, coming up. I was like, yeah, that's going to sit there, and I'm not going to give it away because I'm not giving that stuff to anybody who's like, so I'll eat it. I'll eat the baby food. Some of that stuff's tasty.
Well, dude, there's literal metal in baby food. It's actual metal. I mean, it's a fine line because we need iron. We don't have enough of it, especially at an early age. A lot of times you'll see iron fortified beverages and things like that.
Yeah.
It's not just like when you take an iron capsule, it's almost like crushed powder in a tablet. We're talking metal filings. Check this out.
Our post about Gerber having metals in their baby food.
That's iron. So it's in a lot of cereals. It is a metal and we eat it, which feels a little weird, but our bodies need it. Our blood uses it to produce hemoglobin. And the coolest part is that you can extract it from cereal. Put some cereal in a bag, put a little water in and wait an hour. Now that you have your cereal slush, take a strong magnet and just massage the bag. I find it easiest to move the magnet towards a corner and then eventually you will see these, you can see it's already kind of attracted to the magnet. These black filings emerge and that is your iron. Right there.
I should way too cheery to be talking about steel filings in my food.
Well, that's
She's
because
very
she
smart
look
though. She has
you
a
seen
brilliant
her
family.
house?
She's I think an astronomer or something like that. She's
Yeah,
a proper
yeah.
scientist, but
That's I mean, when you're not affected by it, of course you're gonna be cheery because, but not to kind of talk bad about her, she lives in a house that looks like it's part of a mansion. If
yeah,
you look at the background, it's beautiful there. However, she's trying to let people know, hey, look, this is happening, and I appreciate that somebody who's not affected by this because she can probably afford her own chef if she wanted to, is
yeah,
taking the time to look at this stuff
sure,
and tell people
sure.
about it.
And it's not just
So
baby food. I know we've talked a lot about baby food because it is so important at, the early stages of life. Contaminations at those level have lasting effects. We don't know the genetic because there's nobody doing long-term studies on this stuff. Right? A
yeah,
lot of these chemicals we weren't using as little as 10 years ago. And I just want to quickly go through some other ones here. Lead and arsenic in juice. Now, apple seeds do contain a tiny, tiny bit of arsenic in the seed. Not enough that would ever kill you in nature. But in an industrial processing plant where they're grinding everything, including the seeds, billions of apples go through that damn thing. All of a sudden, arsenic is present. And also the heavy metals. We talked about artificial sweeteners. So things like sucralose, which would be Splenda,
right.
or even aspartame. It could actually damage your DNA. This is epigenetics. It can do something to your genetic makeup. So we know sugar's bad. It feeds cancers and causes diabetes. And, people that have sugar regulatory issues should not be consuming more sugar than they need. This is something even worse. So if you're drinking Diet Coke out there, it could be screwing up your DNA, not just giving you blood sugar issues, right? The effects of this is effectively a synthetic chemical. This is not a naturally occurring molecule in nature. Somebody just needed a replacement for that. And in the 80s, the diet craze and Richard Simmons workout videos was a big thing. Everybody's drinking Diet Coke.
Yeah.
And Diet Coke still has a glycemic response. Even if you drink Diet Coke as a diabetic, it is still affecting your blood somehow. It is affecting your body's insulin system. So Diet Coke is not, and don't have three, triple cheeseburgers and a Diet Coke, please. You become the stereotype.
Oh,
Cadmium in chocolate. Heavy metals, not good. And it is found right at the level of the cocoa bean itself. I'm not quite sure how this happens, whether it's leaching it out of the processing equipment that's mixing it all together, but lead and cadmium in chocolate. This article is talking about how to remove those chemicals. And I mean, look at the title. Experts are using a cutting edge method to remove a dangerous element from chocolate. So you need a cutting edge special tech just to get this stuff out. That's why it's in there, because nobody has a way to get it out. So be careful with how much you consume on certain things, even cans. This article is talking about beverage cans having BPA. It's a coating on the inside so that the acidic soda doesn't react with the can, because acid and metal is reactive. How do they prevent that? It's like a layer of wax. Well, that's BPA in that. And we talked about earlier what BPA can cause. Even shellfish, heavy metals in the ocean, toxic waste being dumped in the ocean. The smallest creatures eat it. Bigger creatures eat them. And when you get to fish the size of like tuna that are literally eating bigger fish, which have eaten millions of smaller fish, the levels of mercury and heavy metals that are present in these fish is way off the scale. Not to mention radioactivity. We had Fukushima Daiichi pump millions of gallons of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. So there's also a radioactive effect on certain fish and shellfish. Our advice, eat it very sparingly. Don't eat it if you're pregnant. Because it could make you sick, and that's not a good idea. But just for the heavy metal component, just limits, very, very small, and be careful where it's coming from. Most of the shrimp that you buy, unless you live close to the Gulf of Mexico, it's probably coming from Asia, and they're fishing in waters where there's no regulations on what can be dumped in there. And there's a lot of even with industries like leather tanning and things like that, they're using heavy metals to make the skins more durable and you know what I mean, make them purposeful. And then when they're done, it's just this chemical soup and it's getting dumped. So it's a bad thing. There's a lot of going on. I sort of saved the best for last in terms of what's in your kind of thing with the gross stuff. So shock warning to anybody who doesn't like seeing gross stuff. We're going to do what's in a Big Mac, what's in a hot dog, what's in the burger mix itself. And that'll probably bring us to the end here. So we'll bang through these real quick. So let's start with the Big Mac.
What's in a McDonald's Big Mac? Let's find out. The bun, just bread, right? Nope, the bun contains both canola and soybean oil along with sugar. In the bun, the meat is actually 100% beef. No fillers, so that's not bad. Pickles are just pickles, right? Nope. There's 10 ingredients in McDonald's pickles, including potassium sorbate, polysorbate 80, and aluminum salts. None of those are good for humans. The lettuce is just lettuce. The secret sauce, not so secret. Seed oils, canola oil, soybean oil, propylene glycol, high fructose corn syrup, and caramel color. Got another 100% beef patty, some more of that seed oil, propylene glycol, secret sauce, and a piece of American cheese, which is not actually real cheese, full of microplastics. So that is what is in your Big Mac at McDonald's. Is it any?
Propylene glycol is also in antifreeze, and it's in vaping juice. And that's when you vape, you get a much higher concentration of propylene glycol, and people are now developing respiratory issues as a result of that. Again, you think it's stuff that you can trust. And yeah, he was right about the patty being meat-based products. There's no plastic or sawdust in it. But this is what industrial-grade beef patty creation looks like. Warning to anybody with a sensitive stomach. Maybe it's a good thing. We'll scare you straight. Don't eat. You want a burger? Buy some meat, grind it yourself. You know what's in it. Make the best burger you've ever had in your life. Because here's what it actually looks like. What is that white powder? Why are they putting white powder in the meat? What is that? More white powder. Coloring, preservative, nitrates, stabilizers, all like. Literally made from innards and skin and lips and the buttholes of the cow. And pink waste punched into discs that you think is a hamburger. Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah, look at them grill marks.
Whoever designed that process should be in prison.
I agree. I agree. I agree. Now, I want to end off before we close here. We got a few minutes to keep it under our 2-hour mark for our next network. The grossest thing I've ever seen in my life is how they make a hot dog. So here we go. 34 seconds of what's in a hot dog.
Here's what's actually inside a hot dog. Back before hot dogs were such a popular food, they contained such things as horse, dog, and sawdust. However, now it's slightly different. After separating an animal carcass into all of its choice cuts, there are always plenty of smaller bits left over that wouldn't make sense to sell on their own. Some of these leftovers that will go into the grinder can be the meat from the animal's head and lots of fat. Then it gets sent off to different manufacturers where they add their own ingredients. Sodium diacetate is dumped into the mixture to help kill the deadly germs, and sodium nitrate is added to help keep the meat a nice good color to make you think it's fresher than it is.
I don't want to eat anymore.
I'm never eating a hot dog again, ever.
I think I'm going back to a liquid diet. I finally, after 2 years of eating a liquid diet, made it to solid foods, and I don't even want them anymore. I've convinced myself to go back on the diet.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to say, if anybody does want to have more organic in their produce, easy way to tell in case it's not, the signs aren't clear. Everything has what's called a PLU code, especially produce. It'll be a 4-digit number. So for example, 4044, it's what the girl at the checkout is rapidly, hitting on the cash register when she's doing all your produce. So 4044 is the code for peaches. But if you get 94044, that is organic peaches. So there are still controversies about organic. There kind of really isn't an organic food because you might have an organic farm and the guy spraying 2 farms over, it's still getting in the water table and getting in your food. But if the PLU code has a 9 in front of the usual code, that's how you know it's broccoli. I think bananas are 4011. So 94011 would be organic bananas. Again, if there is such a thing. But essentially, the most important thing that we want to cover here is that the labels are outdated. The testing and the requirements are outdated. There's no regulations requiring, these companies to do more and go over and above. And many food industries rely on self-policing. They give these guys sort of anonymity that they're trusted. Their brand's been around for 100 years. They just let them go. And it's not until people do their own private work and test and stuff and realize, hey, this stuff is in our food, then they take it to the FDA and still nothing has happened. So it's up to you. Don't trust the governing bodies. That's about all I got to say, man. It makes you wonder. It makes you upset, especially if you have little ones. And it makes you feel a little helpless because what can we do? This exists in a lot of things and it shouldn't. Everything from food, clothing, chemicals, shampoo, soaps, cosmetics, the air we breathe, the water we drink. And we're going to do what is in our water on the next episode. So this is what's in our food. What's in our water will be next week. And it's been a lot of fun. Final thought to you, Marquise, before we close out.
Yeah, I was going to get into like some of the solutions, but I think we kind of covered everything. So long story short, advocate for politicians and policies that help improve the process of testing and monitoring these foods. Advocate for more regulation. I know that some people are turned off by it, but it's not a socialist, communist, Chinese plot. It's actually the opposite of a socialist, communist Chinese plot. It's to help you. And advocate for things that protect whistleblowers. Advocate for companies that promote organic foods and natural foods and not having all these additives. And of course, just for yourself, eat at home. Try to eat more at home. Cook at home. Cook with safe products. You mentioned earlier about the kind of cookware that you use. Some of the cookware is not good to use. Try to advocate for using safe cookware. The non-stick stuff can release the harmful chemicals. So get some. Maybe just go with stainless steel instead of the others. And avoid. Be careful with or take note of things that have been contaminated with mercury by following the news on these things. Follow the news on all of this stuff. Please add it to your news reading list because it's important. It's your life. It's your children's life. It's our future. So. And
wash your produce. As we saw, they color sweet potatoes to make them darker. And currently right now, the makers of Roundup, which is Bayer, are facing, I don't even know how many lawsuits because Roundup has glyphosate, which not only is screwing up the soil biology, it's getting into the food and we're eating it and we don't know the full-term effects of that. So right now, Roundup is getting their ass sued into the ground and they're spraying that stuff on the food we're eating because it's cheaper for them and they can maintain status quo. So it's time to get tough, time to make some money. And, make these people pay a little bit for that. Not that you're going to raise the cost just to do it right. No, you're going to do it right or we're not going to buy your product. So let's take a little bit back from these people and make some noise. So with that, we will call it a day. On behalf of myself, Louis Borges, and my co-host, Marquise Williams, I want to thank you for joining us. If you like our episodes, please hit that like button and subscribe to our various channels if you haven't already. We're super excited to present what is in our water next week. So we'll see you next Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Quantum Ladder Podcast. Take care of each other. See you next week.